Before I begin, why not subscribe to my channel? It's entirely up to you if you like what I say or if you agree with it. However, if you do like the content, please click the like button. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you know when I upload a new video, and I always welcome comments, just not abuse. There is precious little to look forward to under Mr. Keir leadership, but there are some shoots of hope to be found. The left may have been virtually swept from the party formerly known as Labour's benches, but the increase in the vote share for left-leaning candidates, the increase in Green Party MPs from 1 to 4, and the reduced majorities in formerly safe Labour seats gives the progressives in the electorate some measure of hope. Mr. Keir may be the Prime Minister now, but on the opposition benches is the spectre of the man he helped undermine and try to destroy in the form of newly elected independent MP for Islington North, Jeremy Corbyn. Corbyn, while still a Labour Party member, had his hands tied to a significant extent in any attempt to hold the Starmeroids, that's similar to hemorrhoids but a significantly bigger pain in the arse, to account. No longer is Corbyn so restrained, and he'll no doubt make sure he's a thorn in their side for the next 5 years. Mr. Keir will also find himself under greater scrutiny on his pro-Israel stance from the so-called Gaza bloc of MPs who were voted into their positions on a pro-Palestinian mandate, a group of MPs that, ironically, he created, several more thorns in the side to contend with. Of course, a landslide in terms of seats was not based on a love or even like of Mr. Keir and his party, but on the almost total collapse in the Tory vote, the Tories having become so corrupt and toxic that even their voter base couldn't bring themselves to support their favoured party and either stayed at home wallowing in self-pity or moved their vote to Reform UK or another party, although precious few moved to Labour. The rise in independent candidates, several of whom were former Labour candidates purged in favour of Starmeroid drones, cut into the Labour vote count, reducing some former Labour majorities to a mere handful of votes, setting the stage for an electoral defeat in the next election if the party formerly known as Labour doesn't deliver real change for the working class and disadvantaged. At least one positive thing to come out of the political chaos of recent years is that there seems to be very few safe parliamentary seats for any party. Unfortunately, the number of fears we now face are growing. Apart from the dozens of MPs for the party formerly known as Labour returned to Parliament, which is bad news in itself, some of the more swivel-eyed loons from the Tories also got returned to Parliament, including Dr. Death himself, Ian Duncan Smith, the man personally responsible for the premature and preventable deaths of 148,000 benefit claimants. Former Labour MP Ed Ballsup reportedly said that not taking Dr. Death's seat was a price Mr. Keir would consider worth paying, which shows a level of hostility towards the left within the Blairites even now, but that they can voice such odious opinions because they're not the ones paying the price, are they? We now have a weather vane as Prime Minister, a man who changes his position depending on the strength of the gusts of political wind that does him the most good personally, and who seems unable to lead, as evidenced by the fact that he waited for Sunak and Biden to give their positions on anything before he'd commit to a position himself. Not what the UK needs right now. And who else has influence over Mr. Keir? He started his term in office saying he was going to withdraw the objection to the arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant for war crimes. But a couple of days and a visit to Israel by David Lammy later, the objection was back in place. Does Netanyahu have influence on UK foreign policy? And if so, will the UK be run in the interests of the citizens of the UK or in the interests of the State of Israel? Mr. Kidstarver believes nothing, stands for nothing, promises nothing, and that's what he'll deliver. Nothing. His policy position prior to the election was to promise little to nothing, and despite using the word change as his slogan, was offering nothing but continued Tory austerity policy. Many of his cabinet members have been funded by big business, private healthcare companies, or pro-Israel lobbyists, which means that the policy will be formed on the basis of what's best for their donors and not what's in the best interest of the country. Wes Streeting, the man now in charge of the NHS, is pro-privatisation of the NHS. And why wouldn't he be? He's paid for by private healthcare companies. Ironically, the party that gave us the NHS and the welfare state will be the party, albeit a bastardised version, that finally takes it away. The NHS will falter and die, and not due to lack of investment, but due to a large percentage being creamed off to pay the profits for the private healthcare companies that Streeting's going to bring in. The service will suffer and health outcomes will tank. Rachel Reeves is unwilling to do what's necessary to reverse the decline in public services because she has set herself fiscal rules that are meaningless, tying her hands when they don't need to be tied. The sick and disabled benefit claimants so harmed by the last 14 years of Tory cruelty can look forward to more of the same if the pre-election rhetoric from Liz Kendall is to be believed. She was a person who stated that the Tories were too soft on benefit claimants, so it seems that now she's in charge of the Department for Work and Pensions, we can now expect her to tell Dr. Death to hold her beer while she shows him how many benefit claimants she can drive to premature and preventable death. And finally, to return to Mr. Kidstarver himself, we can look forward to him wringing his hands and complaining that his hands are tied because the Tories crashed the economy and his party has to stick to Reeves' meaningless fiscal rules. He'll say that we can't afford to lift hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty, and that it's a difficult decision or a tough choice, when that's not true, especially when he's decided to spend more money and arms for the Ukraine cause. Where's the money for Ukraine coming from, Mr. Kidstarver? If we can't have nice things because there's no money, how can we send anything to Ukraine? We can look forward to the UK's reputation on human rights and international law descend to the depths of hell with his unwavering support for the genocide being perpetrated by Israel on the people of Gaza, and the blind eye he's turned on any racism other than anti-Semitism. Given his extremely thin skin and his abhorrence of dissent, we can look forward to the cracking down on our right to protest, and there'll be further attacks on democratic processes if his anti-democratic actions within his party are any indication. What we have in government now is a vain, narcissistic, power-crazed control freak with a hair-trigger temper who's economically illiterate, lacks compassion and empathy, and has absolutely no backbone. A Prime Minister who is so weak he can't take criticism or opposing views, and who'll have his hand on the red button controlling our nuclear arsenal. Let's hope no other leader upsets him, or he might nuke them in a fit of pique. If I've painted a bleak picture of the future, it's because it is bleak. Care to join me on the fringes and watch the UK burn?